At least 60,000 dead over nearly 7 decades, 3 wars between 2 nuclear-armed states, and countless human rights violations.
जहाँ पे भी मैं गया हूँ, वहाँ खून खराबा जरूर हुआ है. So जब तक खून खराबा नहीं होता, तो मेरा मन नहीं भरता.
This is the story of Kashmir. Let's go way back. Located in the Himalayan mountains, Kashmir is rich in resources and diverse in history. It was home to Hindus and Buddhists by the 9th century, and in the 14th century, Islam emerged as Kashmir's major religion. Under Akbar Zain ul Abidin, Kashmir prospered through religious inclusivity and progressive policies. Muslim rule ended in 1819 when the Sikh kingdom of Punjab captured the region from the oppressive Afghan Durrani Empire, though the Sikh kingdom implemented its own form of oppression. After the Anglo-Sikh War of 1845, the British East India Company annexed most of the land from the Sikhs. As the British were hardly shy at distributing land that they seized without considering the indigenous people, the Kashmir Valley was quickly sold to Hindu Dogra Raja Gulab Singh on the condition that he acknowledged the British government's supremacy. The Singh family's rule was cruel and greedy. Kashmiri Muslims were subject to slave labour, heavy tax and state violence, demonstrated in 1931 when 22 protesters were shot and killed at the trial of an anti-Maharaja activist. The day is known as Martyrs' Day. Kashmir's struggle for freedom started long before the creation of India and Pakistan.
August 15th, 1947, the great symbol of the British Empire came down for the last time.
When India gained independence from the British Empire in 1947, the country was ideologically split. Majority Muslim provinces became the newly created Pakistan, and majority Hindu provinces remained as India. The partition is one of the bloodiest in history. Almost 1 million people were killed in the sectarian violence that followed. Kashmir's Maharaja Hari Singh was asked to join one or the other. Fearing they would join India, some Kashmiri Muslims rebelled. The Maharaja tried to quell the uprising. Around 200,000 people died. Hearing reports of attacks on Muslims, tribesmen from Pakistan's northwest frontier invaded Kashmir. The Maharaja asked India for help. India obliged, but on one condition: Kashmir joins them. He signed the instrument of accession, but it was agreed that a vote would be held once the fighting ended. The proposed referendum would have no option of independence though. Kashmiris would join India or Pakistan. When the war ended on January 1st, 1949, the UN-backed ceasefire line split Kashmir between Pakistani and Indian administration, but the vote never happened. To this day, Kashmiris still haven't been able to decide their own future. Following the conflict, the western portion of Kashmir came under Pakistani administration. Kashmiris seeking their rights here have been met with political repression and torture at the hands of Pakistani authorities. But it's the largest portion which came under Indian rule that suffers from the most violence and unrest. It's majority Muslim with a number of Hindus, Sikhs and Buddhists. China controls the most uninhabited area called the Aksai Chin. Pakistan and India fought over Kashmir again in 1965 and 1999. In the 1980s, increased opposition to Indian rule led to armed resistance against Indian troops. Pakistan provided weapons, training and financial support to the separatists.
The government of Pakistan has endorsed that Kashmir is a freedom struggle. It is not terrorism.
The region's insecurity forced 100,000 Kashmiri Hindus out of the valley. By the early 2000s, India had seemingly crushed the movement through mass arrests, suppression of rights, counter-insurgency operations and political initiatives.
There is a determination all round to see that violence comes to an end.
Today, India-administered Kashmir is the most militarized zone in the world, with over 700,000 Indian soldiers occupying the area. And their presence only complicates Kashmir's already divided politics. In 1957, India claimed Jammu and Kashmir as an autonomous Indian state, absorbing it into their state assembly. Elections in 2014 resulted in a coalition between the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party and the India-leaning People's Democratic Party. So Kashmir's current government is essentially pro-India.
I go for this alliance out of conviction, not convenience only.
It's a hideous alliance. They haven't done anything concrete to make any progress towards the resolution of Kashmir.
Indian state believes that it has a democratic mechanisms on the ground in the form of an elected government, and the Indian state believes that it has some kind of a legitimate framework through which it can resolve these problems.
The pro-Pakistan and independence groups generally fight for their rights outside the election process, as faith in elections was lost in 1987 when a popular coalition of anti-Indian parties gained only 4 seats. This election was reportedly rigged. Now, many Kashmiris can't take elections seriously.
They take turns to run Kashmir for Delhi.
The raiding of polling stations and mistreatment of activists during the 1987 election is seen as the spark that ignited the armed rebellion against Indian influence. So what's happening now? Although the Indian government says the armed resistance in Kashmir has reduced from 30,000 fighters during the 1990s to less than 100 today, its army still maintains an authoritarian presence there. Hundreds of people have been killed every year since a wave of non-violent protests erupted in the Kashmir Valley in 2008. The killing of rebel commander Burhan Wani in July 2016 sparked the biggest uprising in decades. The 21-year-old was seen as a symbol of Kashmir's indigenous youth-led armed resistance.
Everyone from Jammu and Kashmir, especially from Trab, wants to be a Burhan.
Tens of thousands came onto the streets calling for freedom, but were met with force from Indian troops. The protests were quelled immediately, with mass arrests, cutting communication, and region-wide curfews. Activists say Indian troops routinely get away with a multitude of human rights violations.
Rape, widespread use of torture, mass graves of Kashmir, thousands of unmarked graves in the mountains of Kashmir. Who are those people? Why were they killed? There's no answers. Disappearances, more than 8,000 people who we Kashmiris know as disappeared. We don't know where they are. Extrajudicial killings, fake encounters where they would take innocent Kashmiris to a forest, murder them, faces mutilated, dressed in fatigues to be passed off as dreaded militants of Lashkar-e-Taiba.
The Indian army denies most of these claims.
We are an army which believes very strongly in human rights. I think we have a very good human rights.
But the Jammu Kashmir Coalition of Civil Society has documented hundreds of cases of people being abused or killed. Most recently was the case of Farooq Ahmed Dar, who in 2017 was used as a human shield to protect an Indian army jeep from stone throwers. And the use of iron pellets to disperse protesters continues to blind Kashmiris, despite condemnation from human rights groups. Amnesty International says Indian government policy in the region gives its army legal immunity for their actions, making conviction rates close to zero. Pakistan regularly raises the Kashmir issue at the UN, and India accuses Pakistan of exploiting the unrest in Jammu and Kashmir to further their goals in the region. So why do both countries want control of the land? India claims Kashmir maintains their secular status, being the only majority Muslim region, and Pakistan says a majority Muslim state should naturally be a part of a Muslim nation, but it's more likely over water. Pakistan's only water supply is the Indus River. It happens to first flow through India-administered Kashmir. The Indus Water Treaty, signed by both countries in 1960, gave Pakistan control of 80% of the river, but also gave India the power to utilise the remaining 20% in Jammu and Kashmir. India uses the water for irrigation and has started multiple dam projects which could reduce the river's flow through to Pakistan. As the two nuclear-powered nations boom in population, the need for both water and hydro-powered electricity continues to increase. Yet, it's the Kashmiris who lose the most, both in lives and resources, and this only fuels their drive for independence.